Which Punisher? There's been like 5 of them.
There's only been one Blade. There's only ever going to be one Blade.
Hello and welcome back to A Stark Contrast, where we discuss the differences and similarities from Marvel Comics to their MCU counterparts. And we are your hosts, Geoffrey
and Dai.
Hello, and welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back, Jeff.
Yes, we are here. Back again.
We are here.
Nonstop.
The week of New York Comic Con.
Yes, it is.
If you're listening to this on drop day, as of Saturday,
yeah,
Jeff and I are currently in New York Comic Con.
Yes.
New York.
We're just in New York in general, yes.
Yeah, unrelated reasons, but one common thread. And hopefully, at the time of this drop, Jeff is currently eloping with Lindsay Olsen.
Yes, I have moved to New York.
Does she live in New York?
I would assume she's a New York.
She feels like a New Yorker.
Yeah.
So Jeff will have met Lizzie yesterday. And we will talk about it in our next episode. Crazy.
When I like there'll be a picture at some point, and
yes,
I'm saving that picture for my my October monthly dump.
Cannot wait. So speaking of Lizzie, I just wanted to kind of quickly touch on last week's big reveal on Agatha, or 2 weeks ago at this point. Yeah, but we'll talk all about it in our next episode, which will be the season 1 kind of review of Agatha All Along.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's kind of weird, right? I thought the same.
There's 4 episodes left. Yeah,
there's 4 left, and I was like, oh, so by the time we drop
this episode, there's 3 episodes left,
and then we record every other week.
Yes,
and so our next drop. We'll be recording either the night after, probably the night after at this rate.
That's probably
November 1st.
The move.
Or October, Halloween, if not November 1st.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be wild. Yeah, it's going to be very crazy. But yeah, we'll talk about it next on the show. But yeah, they just dropped this week a character poster for a particular character, spoiler alert, for a particular character that was revealed in episode 5.
Yes.
6? 5. 5 of the
5
of the series, and it ended with a sick ass needle drop.
I know.
Of Billie Eilish's "You Should See Me in a Crowd."
People hated it.
That's crazy. I mean, I know why they hate it. It's because they're snobby comic book people. But I thought it was unexpected for sure. I didn't think they were going to go that way, but he is indeed revealed to have been Billy Maximoff, and there's a lot to talk about there and a lot to unpack there. So, I mean, obviously, I feel like Billy will be one of our upcoming character studies based on this series alone.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot to talk about officially. You know, when it was just the kids, it was like, we have some things to talk about. But now that we've seen this character in some semblance of adulthood in the wild as a full-fledged character, we can now talk about him and his name reveal. So, that'll be maybe in a month or 2, maybe
yep.
near our 100th episode, which, by the way, if you still haven't given us some suggestions, please do, because that's coming up quick. This is episode 92, and so we're almost there. But we have a lot to talk about, starting with today's, of course. But before I get to that, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if you've seen this, Jeff, but Marvel has officially introduced a new Hawkeye by the name of Charlie Ramsey, a two-spirit, non-binary Native American superhero. Yeah, it's a lot, but I mean, it's all of the good things. And so Charlie was apparently introduced in issue number 5 of The Ultimates from Dennis Camp, Juan Frigeri, and Federico Blee. And so The Ultimates is part of this new suite of Ultimate Comics. Mm-hmm. It's like a revamp of the what was known previously as the Miles Morales universe. And so now they have a new suite of comics. They have these new stories, and so Ultimates is part of that segment. And so they've introduced this new Hawkeye. They look completely badass. Like, honestly, it's like they have like a half-shaved head with a ponytail. They carry a tomahawk, but it's still very traditional purple and blue Hawkeye-ish. It's really cool. I'm really compelled. I'm not even reading Ultimates, but I hear it's one of the best of the new titles. So I might have to pick it up. And it sounds amazing. Definitely go check it out if you haven't. It just came out, which is also kind of cool. So it was part of New Comic Book Day last week, I think. That's exciting news. And so I wanted to say one more thing. I don't know if you've seen this, Jeff, but I'm getting served ads on X of Monopoly Go Marvel Edition.
Oh.
And I downloaded that app so fast. And it ruined my life so quickly. I was like, it's Monopoly, but it's Marvel version.
Yes.
Oh my God. I'm like, I need the season to be over. This is why I can't play Fortnite and stuff, because I would be buying stuff and be packing up.
Oh, yeah.
And so they have this trading card like method of collecting in the game, ruining my life. I'm like, I have to get all 160.
Of course you do. Obviously.
And I'm like at 132 right now.
Oh my God.
I know. I have less than 2 months to get the rest, but
wow.
It's pretty cute.
There you go.
I hate myself. Okay, so in the spirit of spooky season, we are covering these occult characters that we have not yet been able to touch until now, more so than ever. And so if you hadn't been following along, we just covered Ghost Rider as part of the kickoff, if you will. And so now today, we're going to cover another character that we both I think we love this character.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so before that, just a reminder, we are not experts and we don't claim to be. We're just a couple of nerds nerding out. And in this episode, we are going to nerd out all about
Blade. The only one. There's only going to be ever one blade. There's only going to be ever one
blade. I know. I can't not hear anything in the West.
And I think it's because when I heard the voice again in Deadpool Wolverine, I was like, damn, did he really sound like that? Like, did he have to put that voice on in the original? And then today I rewatched the original. I was like, all right. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh.
It's like, and I saw an article. I meant to watch it, or maybe it was an interview of him discussing where he gets the Blade voice from. And I was like, oh yeah, because that's not his natural cadence. His natural voice is just very normal. It's a very normal voice. Yeah. But I didn't realize until I also rewatched it that he's down here. His register is really low, and it's just very cool and slow. And I was like, oh yeah. And so how could I ever forget? All that said, before we get too deep in the weeds, created by Marv Wolfman.
Wow, that's a name.
He's got a name on him. I love Marv Wolfman.
Whoa.
Yeah, so he's been responsible for many of these characters, but as well as Gene Colan. So these two are definitely stunners from the 70s, and Blade's first appearance was The Tomb of Dracula, number 10. And so that was cover dated July 1973. And the title of the story is His Name is Blade. Blade. So here is the cover. This incredible freaking cover. Very 70s. Oh, so good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
the Vampire Slayer.
I know, exactly. He's like, maybe you're hot stuff back in Transylvania, but nobody messes around with Blade. Vampire Slayer. Oh, wait, I didn't read the top part. Drop that girl, Dracula, or this wooden knife will finish you out forever.
Blade.
Blade. Yeah, so guess the cover price.
I've gone horrible on these.
73.
What did I get wrong last time? It was like in the mid 70s as well, and it was I said like 25.
You went way too high.
Yeah, it was like 25. I said 25, and it was like 10 cents, and I was like, oh, all right. 15. 12.
Chad.
Come on, dude.
20.
Oh, now it's 20.
No, in all fairness, I think you said $1 for Ghost Rider, and it was 70s. Or you said 80.
Yeah, and it was like
something.
Yeah.
But it was 20. It was also, it was 25, I think. It was a little higher.
Yeah, the inflation doesn't make sense.
20 cents, literally.
It doesn't make any sense.
But 20 cents would have gotten you this amazing Tomb of Dracula issue.
Wow.
And so as far as getting this comic graded, the highest I found was on Shortbox, the CGC 9.8 for $40,000.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, obviously, again, he's one of the he's not the first, obviously, but he's one of the leading first black superheroes of the era. Because, we've talked about T'Challa as well, and T'Challa is technically the first American black superhero. But so it's sort of in this era of like introducing these new characters, and so maybe that's why it resonates so much. And it's also because it's a Dracula book, maybe. But there is an eBay version, CGC 9.8, for $38,000. So I assume it's the same one. It could be. I'm not 100% sure. But a 9.6 recently sold for $5,700. So
whoa!
If you negotiate or you go into the bid game, you can get the book for nearly 10% of what it's marked up to be, which is like, dang, heritage auctions are probably great for this. Whereas the lowest grade I found was short box CGC 2.5 going for $950, and then on eBay a 2.0 for $710. And then it looks like the fair market value for it is about $7,000 to $11,000.
That's crazy.
And just buying it off the shelf will cost you about $1,000. But be wary, facsimiles do exist, and they're clearly priced as such. So it looks exactly the same, but it says facsimile edition somewhere, or there's some different coloration, which means it was reprinted in modern era. It's probably worth like $20.
Damn.
Yeah, so don't get duped. So I feel like I know the answer to this. So what was your first exposure to this character?
The one and only.
The one and only Blade.
Wesley Snipes. Yeah,
Wesley Snipes.
Of course. The one who's only played it
so crazy
so far.
Yeah.
I'm probably looking like still the so far.
That's another thing to remember, is that cinematically, he is the only person who's ever portrayed this character.
We've only heard the MCU's voice. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all we've heard.
Exactly right. And he's, we're not going to talk about the video games at all, but there are complementary video games that were made for the films. And then, Blade obviously exists in the video game scape as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but he's like everywhere. And yet he's only been in the 3 movies, save for Deadpool and Wolverine. And he's only been at large portrayed by Wesley Snipes, which is so crazy. For me, again, it's another tough one. Definitely not as clear as Ghost Rider, because Ghost Rider I was pretty like, yeah, I had a comic. I'm good with that. Blade, I was not exposed to Blade comics until well into my teens, my later teens, for sure. So he was definitely always a trading card character I was familiar with. And also he popped up, I think, in the cartoons a couple of times, maybe in Spider-Man or something. I don't remember too well, but yeah, I don't remember him nearly as well as I do once he finally hit the movie scene. And then I was like, oh, it's the guy from Cards. And so that's pretty much my exposure to him as well. And so yeah, it's pretty similar. Okay, so speaking of trading cards, I have my handy dandy mini book here instead. And for your enjoyment, Jeff, height 6'2".
Nice.
Weight 215.
Nice.
He's definitely bulkier than Gambit. I always use Gambit as like the medium for it because he is 6'2" as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, and Gambit's I think 220, and he's like Ghost Rider, but he's just 5 pounds lighter than these guys, which is like interesting how they balance the physique, right? And so as far as this mini book is concerned, transformed at birth when his mother was bitten and killed by a vampire, half human, half vampire, Eric Brooks has made it his life's mission to rid the world of all the undead bloodsuckers as the Daywalker, vampire slayer known as Blade.
Yeah, that's pretty much the premise of the first movie. Yeah.
I was thinking, as I pulled this up, I was like, yeah, actually, probably one of the most accurate comic to film characters.
I agree.
By far.
Daywalker.
Yeah, and we'll get into all of that shortly. And so, of course, Eric Cross Brooks, a.k.a. Blade. Yeah, so it's amazing because, again, it's interesting because of somebody like Wesley Snipes and how his effect on this character has been.
Yeah.
You say Blade and you have an immediate thought of what this character looks like, what he feels like, what he sounds like. But if you take it back to the origin story, it's a little different because it's like 1973.
Got it.
So there's a lot of hilarious jargon going on, one of which I'm going to make you read shortly. But his origin story actually takes place in London, of all places. And so, not only in this issue, but in general. And so before we get too deep down there, as far as the issue goes, it starts out, it's like a dreary night, and it's like in the middle of the night. There are two people trying to get on this boat, and they want to flee London to go to the U.S. They want to get married, and they want to elope. They're, basically running away. Who cares what our parents say? We're in love.
Of course.
Let's go and get married in the States.
That always ends well.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, to your point, they're ambushed by a group of vampirs. And so almost immediately, like, they're like, oh, no, Harry, they've got me. And then immediately, this person comes through the shadows. But I do creatures of the damned. Remove your hands from her now. And then like, who? And then he's immediately, they call me Blade. But
it's pretty much like his entrance in the movie too.
It kind of is, right? And
yeah,
like
at the end, at least at the end of the movie.
Yeah,
end of the first movie. Yeah,
in Moscow,
in Russia,
when he's in Russia. Yeah, and so it's funny because like, for me, in my head, I hear the Shaft music almost immediately. Like, you know what I'm talking
pretty
about?
much like 90s techno.
Yeah, no. And you know what you'll notice immediately also is his attire. Is that he is not the sleek, black, tactical looking character yet. He is almost swashbuckling looking. He's got his fro, he's got yellow lenses, he's got this, what do you call it? I forgot what it's called. The thing that goes across your chest, full of wooden blades.
Yeah.
And then he's wearing almost like a pirate trench coat and then boots and such. And so it's a very different look for him. So anyway, the jive music from Shaft plays in my head totally. And then he's essentially introduced into this world as like, there's no real reason why he does this. Mm-hmm. He just doesn't like vampires. That's his thing. He's like, I don't like vampires. I'm going to kill them.
Yeah.
And so, and so anyway, he fights said vampires in this issue, succeeds, and then he's greeted by a character named Quincy Harker and his daughter Edith, who have been tailing what appears to be Dracula's legion. So this trio of vampires that attacked this couple, Harker thinks, oh, they're part of Dracula. I've been trying to kill Dracula for ages. And he essentially says what Daredevil says to Echo in the Echo series, where he's like, I've been tailing these guys for like 3 days and you just ruined everything.
Yeah.
That's the same thing that happens to Blade. And Blade does not care. He's not give a fuck. Yeah, he's like, I don't care. I hate vampires. I'm going to kill them. And so, by the way, if Harker sounds familiar, that's because it's a direct part of the Dracula lore, which of course is stemming from Jonathan and Mina Harker. And in this universe, in the Marvel universe, they are Quincy's parents. So Quincy is kind of old by the 70s, if you can imagine, because the whole Harker thing. His parents are Keanu and Winona Ryder.
Oh, wow.
If you're thinking about Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Okay.
And so anyway, so you get the idea. Okay, Harker and his daughter, they're both also vampire hunters. They've been through it. And then here comes Blade. He's kind of the new guy that's doing it in a vigilante style. And so the rest of the story is pretty heavily Dracula driven because it is his title. It's not Blade's. But it continues with this lavish... Oh, wait, before we get there, I want you to read this. I want you to read this bubble right here. Just these three. It's just so silly. And so Blade is walking away from the Harkers. And so...
He's like, I found the count my way, Pops. And I'll kill him like that, too. See your Gramps and sharpen up your wooden nickels, dig? What?
The dig part, yeah, because it's again 70s.
It sounds like a 70s jive or something.
Very, and I think he said at one point, he's like, yeah, I'm not one of them jive turkeys. I was like,
yeah, exactly.
70s.
That's exactly.
Oh my God, it's so good. So anyway, yeah, there's this lavish party that happens later in the story. And it's Dracula, and he has essentially brought all these people that he wants to convert to either become familiars or part of his crew, his legion of vampires as well. And, you know, he focuses on one woman in particular. He's like, oh, I like her blood. It's very tasty. And he he keeps her in his quarters while he's out schmoozing with the rest. And so once again, thankfully, you know, as Dracula is giving these people, these humans, an ultimatum, here comes Blade. He intervenes once again, and the boat, Dracula has fashioned the boat that it's going to explode at some point, or whatever the whole thing was. So there's all this drama, right? In every story, it's multi-layered, like, oh, the hero has to arrive on time, and there's a bomb that's going to happen, and who's going to get saved? And so Dracula seems to have the upper hand before his newly turned pet intercepts. And so she comes out of the woodwork and she's like, oh, my master, I need you. And it's very, again, Bram Stoker-ish, where they're in that weird haze of like, they're maybe mid-transformation, so they're almost like zombies. And so she's trying to get to her new lover, and he's like, go, woman, get away from me. And thankfully, you know, he and Blade, they start fighting, and Dracula not loses entirely, but he is forced to flee. He turns into a bat and he goes away. And then the boat is seconds from exploding. Blade starts throwing people into the water. Like someone's like, I can't swim. He's like, you go and learn. And then he throws them into the water. And then Blade saves the day. And that's the end of that origin story.
Wow.
And so again, it's kind of like it's interesting because like with Ghost Rider, we started very cold start. He's already Ghost Rider. With Blade, it's interesting because he just kind of appears and he's like, I don't like vampires.
Pretty much.
I'm gonna kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because there's no like in that issue.
Yeah.
There's no backstory. You have no backstory. You just know that this dude is in the middle of London killing vampires.
It's pretty much like, it's pretty much the first movie.
Yeah. So speaking of, Eric Brooks, a.k.a. Blade, portrayed by Wesley Snipes, first appeared in 1998. Blade,
That's crazy.
Directed by Stephen Norrington.
I was 4 years old when that came out.
Oh my God. Holy crap. Yeah, you were. Oh my God. And I decided to add this little fun nugget here. So audience score is 78%.
Wow.
Tomato is 58%. With an IMDb score of 7 out of 10.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty fair.
That's not bad.
It's not bad. I mean, for what it is and for when it was made, I think that's pretty strong.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I mean, tomato meter. I mean, who cares about the tomato meter?
Yeah. What does the audience think?
It's the audience. Yeah, exactly. An audience says 78%, so I'll take that. And so, of course, last seen in 2024 is Deadpool and Wolverine, directed by Sean Levy. And so... Again, holy crap, like looking back on this film, and I think I was 15 when it came out. I was saying to Melanie, actually, I just saw Melanie the other day, and I was talking about how I was prepping and rewatching these films.
Yeah.
And speaking of things resonating differently as an adult, I was like, oh, what headspace was I in?
Watching this movie.
Watching that movie as a full-fledged 15-year-old, and there's like implied BJ on screen in the first 5 minutes of the film. And like, I probably had no idea what was happening.
It's a very gory movie.
And it's very bloody, very gory. Everything's so like hyped up in terms of just hyperactive violence, which is, I don't know, but it's also so good. It's so good and so well made, and I really enjoyed that film. I don't know about you, but man, it definitely stuck with me. Like
I will say the entrance of Blade in that film is pretty. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, where am I right now? Like, all right, in an underground club.
Yeah.
I know I'm in with a bunch of vampires.
Yeah, exactly.
Blood is spewing from the ceiling because they're thirsty.
Unforgettable.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is kind of like risque.
Super risque, right? Oh my gosh, they did that. They kind of recreated that scene in. It's like the fall of the house of Usher.
Raymond?
No. No.
That's how.
Oh my God. No.
Usher Raymond?
No.
He built a house?
Oh my God. I should have known you were going to say
the guy that made yeah.
No. No. It's based off of Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. It's a newer series. It's like the same directors. I can't remember his name. Mike Flanagan.
Okay,
His whole horror like anthology. Oh my God.
That shows my age.
I know. I wish everybody could have seen the face that you gave me. Not once, but twice. You were just like, huh?
The guy who made 8701 in Confessions? That's crazy.
The guy who dated Chili? No. But anyway, yeah, the Fall of the House of Usher was this amazing series that I loved it. It came out last year or something, and so there's this whole entire scene that is almost like a mimic of that. It's a little spookier because it takes place in this really crazy like dilapidated warehouse versus like an underground like club. But yeah, they had this scene where like it's just blood all over the place. It's gnarly. But I wanted to go very quickly through the trilogy. And so have you actually seen all three, or have you only seen the first film?
Probably only the first film, and then
really?
And then like
so not even the second or third at all.
Probably like on TV, like when it's on cable.
Sure.
That's probably it in passing.
Yeah.
Because I watched a lot of TV growing up. Way too much TV.
I believe that. But it's interesting because I started to panic and I texted Jeff and I was like, oh my God, yeah, these films are not on Disney Plus. I forgot that they weren't on there. And it's probably because of the agreement they have with New Line Cinema.
Yeah.
And so I was able to find number one, and I'm cheap. I'm gonna be honest. I was like, I don't want to have to pay for it. I ended up paying for it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I bought it. I was like, I like the film enough that I'm gonna buy it. I just bought it. And so I was like, I wonder if I can find 2 and 3, or am I gonna have to buy them as well? But I was able to find them streaming on USA. But the major issue with that is that there are commercials, and it's censored.
Wow, that's not fun.
So watching those films censored, especially the third one, I was like, oh, this is miserable. And I kind of almost bought them, but I was like, it's fine. I'll just deal with it. Because the first one, again, is still my favorite anyway, but it is a different landscape, if you will. And so things are bleeped out and text is blurred. Like it's kind
That's
of insane.
hilarious.
Yeah, and so very quickly, the first 3 films, or the 3 films in general. The first film was Karen Jensen was introduced as the bitten hematologist, and the whole world of vampires as it was introduced into the fold, familiars, all that good stuff. And then Blade was battling Deacon Frost, La Magra, the 12, and the Blood God. And then in the second film, it's all about Blade seeking out Whistler after his presumed death in the first film. And then he's introduced to a new breed of vampire hitting the streets, which is like when they had, so if you remember, they had the slit down their jaw and it opened up like a... Yeah. It's so
It doesn't help
gnarly.
that I do not like blood. I do not like blood at all.
That's what you don't like. You're good with Halloween, but you don't like
I do
blood.
not like...
I got it.
Like things opening up.
Gnarly. I was like, oh, I forgot about that.
There's a couple times where I watched the movie today.
Yeah.
And I remember like...
The first one.
The first one.
Yeah.
And I remember just being... There were some times where I was like, no. Yeah, don't like it.
Oh yeah, you probably would have had. Oh man, I'd love to get a reaction video out of you for number 2 and 3, and so yeah, so that new age of vampires carries over from the second to the third movie. But the second, he was battling Damaskinos and the Reapers. And then in the third film, Blade, that's when Blade is exposed because he killed a regular human. He was set up. Then he was branded a psychopath. Then he meets the Night Stalkers who help them after Whistler actually dies.
Wow, Whistler came back?
He came back.
Spoiler.
In the second movie. Yeah, I know. Whistler was dope, man. I love Whistler. Yeah, he came back in the second film because it ended up turning out that, because he had the vampire, like he had the enzymes in his blood, and Deacon Frost had set him up to kill himself.
Yeah.
But he didn't actually succeed. He didn't end up shooting himself. So they must have intercepted at some point, and then they pulled him over and like exported him over to the Europe, where they were essentially feeding on him and keeping him prisoner.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why at the end of the first film, Blade is in Moscow. because he's in Europe already looking for Whistler. And so he finds him in, I forgot which
Oh, wow. They
city.
really picked up where they ended in the first one.
They
Wow.
really did. Yeah, they really,
What a
really
treat.
did. Yeah, because I totally had forgotten. I was like, wait, no, I know Whistler's in the other 2 movies. What happened? And so I rewatched all 3 and on different days. Not I didn't pound through them like I did Wolverine.
Yeah.
Like Wolverine, I had a Wolverine day. Now this one, I staggered them a bit, but they were still excellent. You know, to me, I think they were really good. And so it actually made me really excited to see what they do. And maybe it'll be worth it after all, because they can't mess this up. Like, when you have as strong of a trilogy, as imperfect as they are, with Wesley Snipes, and they were 25, 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, you gotta bring the bar up. You
gotta
know
step
what I mean?
your
You
game
gotta
up, 100%.
raise that bar.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But in the 3rd film, which this is me taking it back to our Morbius episode, because I'm pretty sure I said in our Morbius episode that there was no MCU Dracula. Which is true, but in the 3rd film there is
They
Dracula.
have Dracula.
Yeah, so there is a New Line Cinema Dracula, but not a Marvel proper.
Sure.
So, in the 3rd film, he is indeed battling against Dracula, as well as Danica Talos and her crew. So, that all said, what are your thoughts on the films? Or at least the first one?
It is incredibly violent. I don't like it.
Is it because of the blood?
Well, I mean, it's just like, I think a little too much blood just gets me a little uncomfortable.
Oh, interesting.
Like, I'm like, all right, cool. And then I'm also like, I just hear like the, you know, when you hear that, I'm like,
the slicing tomatoes.
yeah. And I'm like, it's not that I don't like it. It's kind of just like, oh man,
It's a lot.
it's a lot.
Sure.
But it was fun. It
Oh,
was
man.
violent. This movie was violent. It was so
It
violent.
is. It's so incredibly violent, and it's also because of a number of things, right? It's like it was before the millennium, before the turn of the century type of deal.
Yeah.
And so this is the era of like, oh, what if we took Matrix but made it bloody?
Pretty
Right?
much.
Because the techno music is there.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat was happening. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of blood in pop culture in general, but also the fact that you have Wesley Snipes, who is also an action hero of sorts, who is also very martial arts savvy.
Yeah.
And then you have the vampires as part of this, and it's a literal bloodbath, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, there are tons of factors. I think like with Interview with the Vampire 2, right? That came out in 94. So it's like quite literally 4 years before. You know, it was all part of the culture back then. Because I remember, if nothing more, like I was super duper into vampires.
Sure.
Like in
Okay,
high
yeah.
school. Oh my God. I was
Yeah.
obnoxious.
I don't think I ever was. No.
I believe the blood thing makes sense. Yeah, I loved anything vampires. I was so into it.
I don't
And
think I was
like,
ever a fan.
Yeah, like you know, when in high school, and there was this whole thing about like, oh, the popular kids and the jocks and all that stuff. Like I was the choir kid, but I was looking at the goth kids like, damn it, you're cool. Like, I wanted to be a vampire. But you know, it never really happened. But yeah, you know, I again, I loved the films. I thought that the stories are obviously not perfect, but for that time, I mean, they were kind of mind-blowing, to be perfectly honest, and they were very entertaining. And as far as I understand, they were all very successful in the box office. Like, they doubled, if not
I believe
tripled,
it.
budget. Yeah, so they were great. They really made an impact as far as comic book films go. So we'll talk about all that a little more, of course, as we go along here. But first stop, we're going to talk about aesthetic. So as you can see, Jeff on our doc, he has come a long way.
That first one is crazy.
It's so wild, right? It's like a yellow trench coat.
With a fro.
Yeah, with a fro and his thingy with all the stakes, but they're not stakes because they're blades instead because of his namesake. Yeah, and then, you know, it's the secondary one, and we see in the film version like what happened there, right? It's very accurate. But again, yeah, he's come a long way. No jive turkey at all. He was definitely more colorful until 1999, appropriately timed with the film. So,
Wow.
much like other characters we have seen either switch more to the comic book version or vice versa,
Uh-huh.
the revamp of Blade's outfits in the comics changed shortly after the first film. So he looked the way he did as depicted on the left, if not slightly modified for a 90s look. He looked that way until the movie came out, and then they drenched him in this like sick tactical drip.
Yeah.
That is what we know today, and it has stuck ever since. He's not changed since then. He's had some minor tweaks and changes, but he's still very much very sleek, black and leather and all that good stuff. And so, much like Ghost Rider, the modernized / updated version of Blade is an absolute badass, and it's incredibly difficult to mess up his gear. So it's been interesting to see the evolution, even with just those 3 films, plus Deadpool and Wolverine, how his suit has come, as far as upgrades and slight modifications and the way it fits on Wesley Snipes' body and all that amazing stuff. And it's all cool. Like, he has enough gear that makes him compelling, but not too much that it makes it unrealistic, which is pretty sick. And then, of course, credit to Sanya Milkovic-Hayes, Wendy Partridge, and Laura Jean Shannon, who were the lead costume designers for the films in succession, as well as the champ, Maya C. Rubio, who took the helm for Deadpool and Wolverine. And Blade's tattoos were designed by famed tattoo artist Freddie Negretti. And so...
Whoa, what a name.
I know, Freddie Negretti. And so, for the longest time, I thought for sure that Wesley Snipes got those tattooed, but they're apparently fake, which I'm kind of sad about. But I mean, I get it. Those are huge. They're a lot.
Yeah.
So when it comes to powers and paraphernalia, with his dhampir physiology, Blade is a designated humanoid vampire hybrid, and due to the unique enzymes in his blood, it empowered Blade with superhuman senses, smelling, hearing, strength, speed, agility, stamina, and durability, as well as regeneration, contaminant transferal, and healing, plus advanced longevity, a.k.a. he ages a hell of a lot slower, as well as skill with magic.
Dude, everybody in the comics got the same powers.
Superhumans.
Like superhuman strength, agility, speed, stamina, durability. Like, okay.
But there's like a threshold, right?
I know.
What puts them at superhuman. And it's like more than they're able to lift more than 100 pounds.
Yeah.
But then it goes crazy.
Yeah.
The scale goes insane from there. But yeah, it's totally true. And especially
they're all the same.
And so in the comics, Blade was able to also turn into a swarm of bats, mist, and even a wolf after drinking Dracula's blood. So aside the transforming, essentially has the same suite of powers and then some in the movies, displaying more agility-based and hand-to-hand weaponized skills. And then fun fact, of course, Wesley Snipes is indeed a seasoned martial artist, especially in arts of Hapkido, Shotokan, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Capoeira, Kung Fu, Wushu, Taekwondo, and kickboxing.
Jeez.
Yeah, and so it's a good point to also shout out Wesley's stunt double, Clay Donahue Fortnott, who did the few more dangerous stunts for Wesley throughout the Blade trilogy. As well as Callie Nell, who did them in Deadpool and Wolverine. And so, it's very interesting because I was curious because when someone is that well-versed in martial arts, I almost feel like they're always like, oh, no, I'll do my own stunts. And so he evidently did like 90%. But if he had to like come crashing down onto something or if he was thrown off of something, that wasn't him.
Yeah.
But otherwise, he did most of them, which is actually
go ahead,
especially considering how in the films that whole the one through line of consistency is that there's always going to be at least 3 major fighting scenes. It's going to be fast paced, and it's going to have techno music.
That's pretty much the Blade movie.
Like Chemical Brothers. It's pretty amazing. So with all that, we're going to go into family, friends, and affiliations. This is when we're going to actually talk a little bit more about Blade and his origin, because there were some notable things missing. Again, from the origin story, we did not really get an idea of who he was, aside he's a vampire hunter, which also, by the way, he wasn't a vampire. He wasn't part vampire in the original part. In the original story. And so you don't even get the vibe. You just, again, he doesn't like vampires. He kills them. But we'll find out more about that as we go along here. So starting first with his father, Lucas Cross. And so his origin stems from the 1920s as a prisoner in Latveria.
Oh, wow.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So that is the homeland of Dr. Doom, if you're not familiar. And so Cross attempted to free Latveria in his own way, deeming its leader a dictator and unfortunately paying the ultimate price, which is he ran his mouth. And they were like, we're going to put you in prison.
Yeah.
And so he was sent to prison. And so dying of cancer in the same breath, Cross was bribed with freedom for a cost from one of his prisoner acquaintances. He's put in a cell with another man. And the guy is just like, what if I told you you could survive this cancer and also be free? And he was like, I'm listening.
You mean Ghost Rider? It sounds like the premise of Ghost Rider.
It's more like that too, right?
Jeez, dude.
And so, unfortunately, the cost is that other person was a vampire. And so he got bitten. And so ironically enough, Lucas was imprisoned and turned before Blade was even born. So the vampire side does not come from his father, even though his father is a vampire. And so the two cross paths later in life when Blade is a full-fledged adult. And funny enough, he actually released Cross from prison himself without realizing that was his dad. And so the two go issue after issue of a flopped reunion, and he keeps telling him, he's like, I'm your dad. And Blade is like, oh, it's so funny because every time he says it, they put dad in quotes. So he's
That's
like,
funny.
And you can just hear Wesley Snipes' voice. He's like, yeah, sure, dad. And it's so crazy. And Blade is fully skeptical. He's just 100% skeptical, because he's trying to make sense of this. He's like, oh, you're from the 1920s and you were in Latveria and all this. And he's like, by the way, you white.
Damn.
Yeah.
How are you my dad?
Yeah, exactly. It's
That's
almost
valid.
what he says.
That's valid.
And so, Cross is a white folk. And so Blade just calls him out. He's like, no, you're not my father. But of course, we learn the truth that it is his father. In fact, it's just, he's just more of his mother than his father. And so when Blade finally accepts that truth, things still go sideways. And then the two part ways. And so they have this incredible, I forgot which year it was released, but it's one of the Blade solo titles. It was only 12 issues long. And that entire arc is just them and learning back and forth what actually happened. Because it's essentially almost been not quite a retcon, but they needed to fill in the gaps of where did Blade come from?
Uh-huh.
What is his why is he the way he is? And so, again, we'll get through it in all of these side characters. And so there is no MCU counterpart for Lucas Cross. Whether or not we'll see him, I honestly have no idea. I don't think he's a necessary character, particularly. But there is one that we have seen, and that is Vanessa Tara Brooks, Blade's mother, and Lucas's wife. And so both of them apparently originated from Latveria. And as Lucas prepared for his inevitable imprisonment, he sent his pregnant wife off to London to take refuge in a brothel that she would inevitably not only give birth in, but also die in. Oof. And so in that Blade series, they do a lot of back and forth. So it's modern, like what's happening in present tense, and then they show the past in like black and white, and so sepia toned. And so they show this entire scenario of Vanessa giving birth in the brothel. And she has other sex workers around her who are helping her, and she starts to have complications with the baby, and it had the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck. And so Blade, I hate saying it because it's a baby, Blade as a baby was not breathing, and so they sent for the doctor. And so we'll talk about the doctor in a little bit.
Okay.
But that also plays into this whole scenario. So unfortunately, now, Tara / Vanessa and she changed her name later on. That's why it's a little confusing. She's first known as Tara. She's introduced as Tara, but then they changed her name to Vanessa. So anyway, she does indeed perish after Blade's birth, and then she was resurrected as a vampire at the end of his so it's 2006, at the end of that 2006 solo title, along with a bunch of other thousands of vampires. So despite all that, despite the fact that his mother does come back, Madame Vanity, who is the woman who owned that brothel, had actually raised Blade, and he considered her his mother. Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
Oh my God.
It gets more complicated.
Everything sounds toxic.
It's so crazy. And so on the cinematic side, we have Vanessa Brooks, simply that, portrayed by Sana Lathan in Blade 1. And so the movie cold opened with her, and her on the gurney. She was bitten by a wild animal. And she was bleeding.
Died at birth.
Yeah, exactly. But in reality, she was obviously bitten.
Yeah, that was a lie.
Yeah. So she was.
I was wondering where that girl looked familiar. I was like, oh, she looks very familiar.
Oh, really?
She was in Love and Basketball.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. She still looks great.
Yeah.
So she's. Yeah, that's how the movie started. And so very similarly throughout the Blade stories, she presumably died, but she was actually revealed to have been turned into a vampire later in the film.
Yeah, that threw me off. I can't lie.
Why?
I don't know. I was just like, I was like, because I guess I'm so used to the trope of like, oh, the mom died. Like they died. Like
she's
you got
gone.
bit.
She's
Yeah.
done.
And then like now like the protagonist is living in their honor, I guess.
Oh yeah.
So I didn't first I didn't expect her to be alive.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I was like, oh, and I'm also like, damn, that's messed up.
It's so messed up. I know. It's got a little touch of Old Boy if you've seen Old Boy. It's like that, where it's just like, oh, wait a minute. And so he had been so removed from his mother, obviously, because he never knew her, and then to come back and be like, oh, she's alive and she's a dhampir.
Yeah, and I'm like,
oh shoot.
And also at the end, or not the end, when Blade, spoiler alert, kills his mother. Yeah. And she was like, she played that card of like you're gonna kill your mother. Yeah. And I was like, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, he is.
I didn't know you.
Yeah. You
where have you been?
You died at birth.
Exactly.
And like I don't know you.
I don't know you.
And you just tried to kill me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna kill you.
Exactly. It's very interesting, right? Yeah, and it's I love that. I love that they didn't stick to the honor card for that. He was like, nah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in his perfectly portrayed way. Yeah, and so like Jeff said, she ultimately dies by Blade's hands near the climax of the film after some interesting undertones. I was like, wait, my girl, are you trying to seduce your boy? Like, what's happening here? Like, what did she say? She said at one point, she was like, have you ever thought how it could be different? And I was like, oh no. No, we don't like that. No. Yuck. But yeah, she had an interesting role in not only the comics but also in the film, obviously. But I'm glad that they didn't stretch it out, and draw it out so over dramatically. It was perfectly bite-sized, no pun intended, for the first film, which is great. And so that brings us to Abraham Whistler. And so, again, I said earlier, I'd love Whistler. But, Jeff, would you believe there is no comic book counterpart for Whistler?
At all?
None at all. Even just in continuity. But it is noted in the Marvel Encyclopedia, I believe it's 2020 or 2022, that the source material has been officially dubbed for the on-screen counterpart, pulled from a different character named Jamal Afari in the comics. And so Jamal grew up on the streets of Harlem, encountering vampires in his youth and learning to protect himself over the years. And so later in life, he is saved by a very young Eric Brooks, who was only 9 years old when he came to Jamal's rescue on the streets. So if you think about all this is crazy because he had been in London, born there with Latvian parents, but somehow ended up in the States in Harlem. I don't know, like there's a whole bunch of lore here. Obviously it's for different reasons, but essentially what I've surmised is that he was just pulled around into different places for his protection, because obviously vampires, right? Yeah. And so from that moment that Eric rescued Jamal. Jamal then began to take him under his wing as an apprentice. He mentored Blade to become the Blade that we now know, and he crafted him into this very perfect vampire hunter. So it is very similar in that way, because Abraham Whistler, portrayed by Chris Christopherson, by the way, in the first Blade as well, first scene in the first Blade, and throughout all three. Rest in peace, by the way. He just passed away last month.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was 88 years old. It was just like, oh, buddy. But yeah, in the films, you know, he is said in, I think in flashbacks as well as the first movie, that he had known Blade since he was a boy. And he's like, I've been killing vampires since I was, before you were born. You know, he would always accentuate that point. And so I think Jamal and Abraham Whistler have a lot in common, and they just changed a few things, especially because the Blade on screen is a different world.
Yeah.
Right? Of technology and all that good stuff. Again, it's in the 90s versus
now.
Exactly. 1900s. Yeah, so when it came to Abraham Whistler, the character, he was both a vampire hunter as well as Blade's mentor, and he was aptly named after the one and only Professor Abraham Van Helsing of Bram Stoker's Dracula lore. And of course, we've seen many Van Helsing in pop culture as well.
Yeah.
Hell, what is it? Sir Anthony Hopkins was the one in Dracula, and then in Van Helsing, it was Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. Funny enough.
So Abraham is named after this character. And of course, you know, Whistler, over not only the first movie, but in the entire trilogy, he proved himself to be a worthwhile ally. You know, stemming from the first film, having found Blade, again, in his youth, and he took him under his wing to fight the vampires and all that crazy stuff. And so, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, he presumably died in that first film, but we do see at the very top of the sequel that Blade went to travel and try and find him. Whistler lived until the third film, but unfortunately dies by explosive suicide because and so gosh, I don't know if you've seen it, if you don't remember that part.
No.
Yeah, so what had happened was that after Blade unfortunately killed the human posing as a vampire, he was set up. He was literally set up by Talos and her crew. Different Talos, not the
I know, that's crazy.
Yeah, the name is very different. The character is very different. But yeah, so after he was set up, he literally had minutes to get back to his headquarters, and Whistler was like, they're coming for us, and he set up things. And once the police started to infiltrate, someone was like, put your hands up, and Whistler's like, what about this one? And he flips the guy off, and he pushes the button, and he tells Blade to run, and the whole complex starts exploding, and he's gone. He died like in the first 10 minutes, I think. And so yeah, unfortunately, that's the last we see of Whistler. He did make it all three films, but it's also like, that's unfortunate because he was a fantastic character. But what a way to go! And so, thankfully, we had a second Whistler come in by the name of Abigail Whistler. And although she has no comic book counterpart, she is portrayed by Jessica Biel in Blade Trinity, directed by David S. Goyer. And so I believe Trinity came out in 2004. So this is officially 6 years of Blade films, and the final chapter as we know it. And so Whistler came in part 2. She's his daughter and part of the Night Stalkers that are introduced in the film, which, by the way, so this is the part where I was like, oh my God, I forgot that all these people have technically been in the Marvel Universe in some capacity. Because the Night Stalkers also included Natasha Lyonne as Summerfield and Patton Oswalt as
crazy.
Hedges. Because Patton Oswalt comes back and he's in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then Natasha Lyonne, the icon that she is coming back for Fantastic Four. So it's like they've kind of been there, and they're being revived, which is amazing because the character that Natasha Lyonne plays in Fantastic Four is blind, and she was also blind in Blade.
That's funny.
I don't know what's going on, but that's kind of an amazing parallel. But anyway, So Abby explains that once vampires resurfaced more openly, that she tracked down her estranged father and wanted in. So Whistler mentions in the first film that, when he's telling Blade about why he does it, that he had a wife and 2 daughters, and they made him watch as they were slowly torturing them or something. And so Abby is one of the 2 daughters, and thankfully had survived that whole thing. And so what I believe happened, is that Whistler, much like Blade in the comics, essentially distanced himself from them for their safety. But yeah, she rekindles with him somewhere down the line as an adult, and she becomes like a baby Whistler. God, you don't remember that, do you?
No.
She wielded, like, her thing was a bow and arrow. Like, she had a
That's
sick
hilarious.
Bow. It was so cool.
No.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. Really good stuff. And she was like fresh faced, like barely 21 years old, Jessica Biel in this movie. And so Abby and the Night Stalkers then banded together, handling the smaller vampire problems that were completely off of Blade's radar. So he was off fighting these big baddies, and this crew was somewhere in the city or in the world just handling vampires as well. And so they never crossed paths until after Whistler died, because, and this is an amazing moment in the 3rd movie, when Abby and Hannibal King are essentially saving Blade. He is incapacitated. Hannibal yells and he goes, "Whistler!" And Blade's like, because it's like that moment of like his friend has just died, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" And so that's how they come together. It's
Whoa,
so cool. Gosh, I know you need to watch it. If you haven't
there's
watched
so many
it.
things I need to just rewatch.
Yeah. And so that brings us to Hannibal King, and so when it comes to genre types, Marvel has essentially covered it all, and they topped it off with not only a detective, but a vampire detective.
That's
with
hilarious.
The character
honestly.
Hannibal King, yeah. And so at first glance, at least to me, this guy essentially looks like Marvel's version of Constantine. And are you familiar with Constantine? That's a DC character.
The
Hellblazer.
Keanu Reeves movie?
Yeah, it is that character.
Oh.
But he looks very different in the comics. He's actually blonde, and he's got a trench coat. He's iconically in a red tie and a white shirt. He was on the CW shows for a bit.
Okay.
He was like the only character I really, aside Nightwing and the Bat Family, he's like the only character I really, really like. And so anyway, at first glance, yeah, you see this character, he's very reminiscent of Constantine, but rather than dabbling in the occult through magic and demons, Hannibal King is more of the vampiric side.
Got it.
So in the comics, he was bitten by Deacon Frost, who we come to know as the big baddie in the first movie. And so because of this in the books, you can imagine that the 2 kind of trauma bonded in a way.
Okay.
Because there's a lot going on with Deacon Frost. We haven't talked about him yet, but we will. And so that kind of brings them together, and it makes Hannibal like his Blade's kind of, I don't want to say right-hand man, but definitely one of his go-to guys when it comes to this whole occult universe. And so this is why I'm kind of tripping, Jeff, that you haven't seen Blade 3 or just haven't seen it in a long time, because Hannibal King in Blade Trinity is portrayed by Ryan Reynolds.
That I know.
Yeah, and it's so crazy.
That I know.
Because this is one of the earliest iterations of Ryan Reynolds' work, and in the trademark quip form, right? Before this was like just before the era or just after the era of Van Wilder and his like frat party boy kind of
2004,
comedy.
yeah,
like right in the nugget of like, he's not a serious actor, but he doesn't want to be the clean cut whatever.
When did
that he was.
What's that movie that he's Just Friends? When did that come out?
Just Friends, 2005. So it's just before. So he's kind of in this weird comedy action film like nugget.
Yeah, but he's not like.
And it preceded X-Men Origins by 5 years. Which is like so crazy. This, by the way, Ryan Reynolds was your age when he filmed Blade 3. Think of that.
Oh, my age right now.
Your age now.
Yikes.
He was your age.
Wow,
in
that's
Blade
crazy.
3. Yeah, it's so wild to think about. And so, regardless of how Wade-coded Hannibal is, Because let me just say, if they did not give that man a name in that movie, you would be like, is this Deadpool? 100%. Like obviously he looks like Ryan Reynolds does at like peak muscular. Like super fit, but he just had a beard. But his personality is almost identical to Wade in X-Men Origins. And of course, Deadpool's inevitable uprising, you know what I mean? So it's just Ryan Reynolds, let's be honest. And so anyway, he was a member of the Night Stalkers along with Abigail and the other crew. And so he used to be a familiar to Danica Talos. And so he was essentially her pet, and she fed off of him and all this good stuff until he decided, you know what? I don't like this. I want to kill vampires. And so he joined the Night Stalkers. Yeah, he's great. He's so good in the movie too, which kind of annoys me. But it's just Ryan. Again, it's just Ryan Reynolds. It's just Ryan Reynolds, yeah. But this time he's fighting vampires and he's covered in blood. So all that said, honorable mentions to Deadpool and Wolverine, especially with Logan, because remember in our Jubilee episode we talked about she became a vampire.
Yes,
that's when Blade came in. And so Blade is uniquely one of these characters where you think he's only in a specific genre. Of the Marvel Universe, but this guy has touched all surfaces. He is totally teamed up with various people from She-Hulk to Captain Marvel. Like he's everywhere. And so I'm obviously not going to talk about any of those characters because we don't see them in the films. But did you want to talk a little bit about Blade in Deadpool and Wolverine?
I mean, it's just like crazy after 20 years. 20 years.
Yeah.
You see Wesley Snipes playing Blade again, and you're like,
literally 20 years later.
You're like, whoa.
Yeah. And he was in his early 40s when he finished the last film.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's
he's
even
60 something right now.
Crazier.
Yeah. He's in his 60s, which is so wild to me. 63, I think. Yeah. And he's still kicking ass.
He was. He was. He was doing a lot of it.
Yeah. Again, he was doing a lot of it where his stunt double did a bit, but I mean, he's obviously still got it and he can still move the way he was.
It was just like, I think we said this in our review of the movie too. It's just seeing that collection of characters together is insane. It's like who we saw like Elektra, where you're like, whoa, Jennifer Garner like is Elektra again.
Kicking ass too.
And then Wesley Snipes, you're like, whoa, that's really Wesley Snipes. Holy crap.
Yeah.
And then you have Channing Tatum as the never ever seen Gambit. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
I guess it's true. Holy crap.
Yeah.
So it's like
looking back on it, it's like, oh my gosh.
Just like wow.
Yeah.
Like just A-list hitters.
Yeah.
Came back. And not for just like one cameo. It was like a significant amount of screen time they had.
Yeah.
Which is sick.
I would love to see a breakdown of how much screen time they all got.
Yeah.
But it is significant. It was kind of balanced across the board.
Yeah. It was insane to see.
Yeah.
And it's probably the last time we see Wesley Snipes as Blade.
You think?
Yeah.
I was gonna ask. Yeah, I think so too. Unfortunately,
yeah,
like he's
of course.
great. It was a great way to sunset.
Exactly, like you said, he's like in his 60s.
Yeah.
He's not gonna want to.
And we don't want to see an old man Blade where then he dies. Like, I like the idea that he is just in the ether.
Yeah.
Being himself.
And then whenever the Mahershala Ali one gets made, then we'll get that when we get that.
Is it ever gonna happen? I don't know.
It's in purgatory, dude.
It's really in purgatory, which is really unfortunate. And I don't know. Like, just I would like it immediately, but who knows?
I agree.
Yeah. So let's move on to love interests. Well, this is actually not going to be very long because although Blade has had romantic interests in the book, like, and we're talking like lady friends, he's got lady friends. There seems to be none nearly as notable as the one we'll talk about today, which is Saffron Calder. And so, like a lot of Blade's notable history, he met Saffron while in London as an adult, only to later, she then followed him back to the US. So he was in London for a long time. And so I think I thought I mentioned it somewhere else on this doc, maybe I didn't, but Blade was born in the 1920s. So he is essentially 100 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And because of the vampire blood, it has slowed down his aging process, obviously. But he spent a great time of it in London because he was born there and raised there by Madame Vanity.
You got me there.
And so he met Saffron in this club. She was essentially getting propositioned by a pimp. He came to her, I know. He came to her rescue because he was raised by women of sex worker nature. He was raised in a brothel. So he has like an affinity for making sure that those women are not abused at all. And so I don't want to say he came to her rescue, but he definitely came to her aid in some way. And so they kind of get together. She follows him enough so that she followed him back to the United States. And so he then takes residency in Boston. He's a masshole. He's in Boston for a long time. And so all around, their relationship seemed pretty chill. Usually there's this heap of drama, but they were pretty chill. It's not like she got turned into a vampire and died and became a zombie and then nothing. None of that happened. They were pretty chill. But it goes without saying that Saffron then encountered her fair share of drama just for existing. So she became his version of a Gwen Stacy, where every other issue she might have been kidnapped or they were going to use her as bait against him or something. And so I didn't mention this earlier, but in the family section, but Saffron and Blade actually go as far as to have a family together.
Uh-huh.
So they had a family situation, and it was pretty normal for what it was, and they had a daughter together.
Oh, wow.
So there is a daughter. Blade does have a daughter in the comics named Brielle, who goes by the moniker Bloodline.
Okay.
It's pretty sick.
Tough.
She's got purple hair. So she's very new to the mix. She was introduced, I want to say, in 2022.
Oh, wow.
Super new character.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is lore that's very fresh, they just have introduced this character kind of to revive. And I assume it was probably intended to correlate with the movie in some way.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, so much for that.
Exactly.
But there is a Brielle out in the ether. Maybe we'll see her in the next iteration of the films as well. Who knows? But Saffron and Blade otherwise grew apart, but they clearly have the one connecting factor, and that is the daughter. And so Brielle has her own brunt of drama when it comes to her dad. There's this whole storyline of she had, I don't know if it was a spell had been cast or something. She didn't remember who he was at all.
Oh, okay.
She just didn't know who her father was. And it involves Doctor Strange. It's this whole, again, occult.
Yeah.
There's an occult circumstance happening. And so a lot of that happens in Brielle's storyline, which, again, just came out 2 years ago. So I'm probably going to read that sooner than later because I'm very interested to learn more. And now they fight essentially side by side, which is pretty cool. So there's a female daughter Blade version in the Marvel universe, but Saffron and Brielle both have no cinematic counterparts. So
the doctor in the first Blade movie totally made up. Mm-hmm. Come to love it. I mean, it was like a half love interest.
Yeah, it was interesting, right? They had a thing, and
it's more like she was into him.
Yes. Because he was just not responding. He doesn't respond to because he doesn't want them to get into danger.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't want to put them in danger. And the same happens in the second film as well. Even more chemistry in the second movie with that character. But it's not really, there's no real romantic anything.
Spark with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Whistler does make a passive comment at one point, but Blade's I don't know what you're talking about. He's very closed off.
Yeah.
And so it is interesting to think that in the books that there is one person that he actually confides in so fully that they have a child together.
Yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, no, nothing ever really comes to fruition in the movies, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Again, I'm all for not having some love action. Yeah, don't
get out of here.
Yeah, we don't need that. But yeah, so no film counterparts for either of those characters, and that's about it as far as the love interests go, at least in this episode. So that brings us to notable adversaries. And so this first one, I had to do it. So
make it happen.
Yeah, I know. I want to see it. It's so perfect. But of course, the film is like stalled, and of course, Sony is Sony because, dear friends, the first adversary we're going to talk about is Dr. Michael Morbius, and so. Again, we discussed Morbius, what feels a lifetime ago, in episode 27 of the podcast. But a sound reminder that Morbius isn't necessarily a bad guy. And despite his vampiric state, Morbius is very much an ally to his peripheral heroic counterparts in modern continuity, Blade and Spidey being among them. And so what essentially happens is that Morbius is a vampire. By proxy, that immediately makes him an enemy of Blade. It doesn't matter if he's good or not, or if it's a misunderstanding. Because, speaking of Spidey was actually present during a very important part of Blade's modern day upgrades. So, they're in this scuffle. They're having this, Blade is there to help Spidey contain Morbius, if you will.
Okay.
Morbius is... What was he? He was possessed. He was under some spell or something. I can't remember what it was, but he was not himself. And he was attacking. He was just attacking left and right. And so Blade is trying to negotiate with Spidey while fighting. They're both fighting Morbius to contain him. Blade is like, Spidey's like, no, he's not a vampire. He just has a special blood, issue. And Blade's like, no, he's a vampire. Look at him. He's trying to bite me. And unfortunately, Morbius bites Blade. He very much bites him on the arm. So when you put somebody who has this blood poisoning that Morbius has in his vampiric, semi-not vampiric state, and mix that with the enzymes that Blade has, you then get what is now known as the Daywalker. So this is the point in which he becomes a vampire that can walk in daylight. That doesn't have the same weaknesses as a typical vampire. And it's thanks to Dr. Michael Morbius. And so he didn't have it until that point. Yeah, he didn't have it until that point. He was kind of just this half-breed. But thanks to Morbius, he's now the one that we see in live action. So without Morbius, there would be no iconic Blade. He would just be a vampire, sort of. Yeah, exactly. So it's very, very interesting. And of course, Dr. Michael Morbius, portrayed by Jared Leto, first and last, officially appeared in 2022's Morbius because, I say officially because, lest we forget, Morbius did have a cameo in Blade 1. And he was portrayed by Stephen Norrington, the director of the film. And so, have you seen this clip? There's a clip of it because it's from the DVD or something. And it's at the very end of the movie after Blade and the hematologist are like on the rooftop of something, whatever. They escaped. It's the end of the movie. Okay. And he's like, he's like saying whatever he says. And so in the cut scene, in the distance, you then see this dark form, figure standing at the edge of the building, and you can't tell who it is at all. You just see flowing hair, I think, and it's just like a dark figure, right? Yeah, and that's Morbius. Morbius was supposed to be in the second film. Wow. Yeah, it never happened. And so it's a whole 5 seconds of Morbius. So there is a Morbius predating Jared Leto, however. Wow. Yeah. So I don't know what happened, because clearly in the second film, it was not what happened. It must have been a rights issue. Maybe that's when the Sony thing came to pass even harder. Because, we all know that situation. Otherwise, there is no actual crossover. None whatsoever. And so I would love to see it. I did put a sad face because I want Blade and I want Morbius in the same room. I mean, just bring on the vampire stuff, Exactly. And I think I even said it to Emma at one point. I was like, this is amazing because he can be in the Blade movies. And then I was like, oh, well, maybe not because Sony. But we'll see. Yeah, I know. They suck. Sorry, you guys are doing horrible work. I swear. At least, well, actually, no, not the art, the execs. You guys are doing horrible work. I know. Gosh, but it doesn't matter because them checks is cashing. They are cashing them so hard. Oh my God. But imagine so many more checks that they could be cashing, right? Whatever. One day. We got the X-Men. We got all these things aligned. Now we just need that side of the fence.
Yeah.
So that brings us to Deacon Frost. We have talked about him throughout this entire episode until now. And so I did not write a lot for Deacon Frost at all because he intersects with so many of the previous characters we've already mentioned. But their beef stems as far back as Blade's birth. So when I mentioned that Tara was having issues with her birth, the complicated birth, one of the sex workers goes and fetches the doctor. The doctor ended up being Deacon Frost. And so she had no idea. He comes in and Madame Vanity is like, oh, he's a vampire. And she immediately knows who he is because Madame Vanity is kind of well versed in this whole thing. I can't remember if Cross had told her, but she knows that these vampires exist. So Deacon Frost comes in, and unfortunately, he even says that he had long watched Tara and he coveted her from afar. So it was sadly like fate that he was summoned because she's bleeding on a table, and he's like, dinner. And so he then bites Tara while Blade is still connected via the umbilical cord. This is the very moment that would intertwine him and Blade because that's how he becomes the hybrid. So he became a hybrid at birth. So this is the thing that's kind of wild too, is that I don't believe until modern ages he was even a vampire. He was just a vampire hunter originally.
Got it.
And then they introduced this lore with Deacon Frost that, oh, no, just kidding. We're going to rewrite that a little bit and take it back to 1924, which, by the way, Blade's birthday is October 24, 1924.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey. So he's about to turn 100.
That's
Congrats.
crazy.
Yeah. So when that evening he was born, was truly when he was born also into the vampire world. So they've added that in retroactively added it. That little nuance. So, and then later in life, obviously, came the Morbius thing. So now he's the Wesley Snipes. So after all these fumbles of rewriting the story, he's finally the Wesley Snipes. So yeah, that is one of many things that intertwines these two characters. Again, I wouldn't say it's like Green Goblin and Spider-Man level, but it is very much of they are arch nemesis. They are always fighting in some capacity.
Got it.
Because Deacon Frost is a jerk.
Of course.
And he is so marvelously portrayed by Steven Dorff in Blade 1.
That guy was thirsty for power.
Crazy.
Holy hell.
And so, like, similarly to Ghost Rider and Blackheart with Wes Bentley, like, Steven Dorff is an evil-looking man. Yeah. He looks like a vampire. He looks like one very, very pointedly. And so, although these two don't have the exact same ties in the film, they have commonalities. And one being Frost lured Blade's mother to his side more or less as bait. So that's the one thing they have very much in common, is that Frost is fixated on the mother for obvious reasons. And I think any supervillain would do that. It's like, what, mother, lover, daughter? Like, they always go after those three. Yeah. Right? And so, yeah, that was Deacon Frost's big bad in the movies. And so he was part of the new wave of vampires that despised the pure breeds and the old ways, and he wanted to have this new uprising, which is why he had the vampire clubs. And he was trying to introduce a new era, if you will. But alas, he got too big for his britches and was absolutely taken down despite being empowered by La Magra. The power of the 12 pure blood vampires. And so you remember that ending where Blade he speared him with all the antidotes, blood antidote viruses, and he bubbled up. Yeah. He bubbled up and blew up.
Yeah, that was kind of also disturbing to me. I was like, what the hell is this?
It's so crazy, especially in 1998 graphics.
Yeah.
And then I started to think, my brain started to rework it and be like, dang, what would that look like in now graphics in IMAX?
Way more detail.
Holy smoke.
I know.
It'd be probably disturbingly
detailed. Some of the VFX in there, I was like, whoa. one, because I notice it, because but I'm also like, wow, they got away with this and people ate it up.
Yeah. 1998 was a different time, man. Different time. And I think they're all rated R. I'm pretty sure they're all rated
I
R.
hope to God, if that's a PG-13 movie, then oh my God, there's going to be a lot of scarred kids growing up.
That's funny. Yeah.
Holy crap.
I'm proof of that.
Wait.
Yes. Rated R.
It should be all rated R.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would hope so. There's a lot going on. But yeah, so that was Deacon Frost. And so, yeah, he bubbled up and blew up at the end of his tenure. And then in the second film, we were then introduced into Eli Damaskinos. And so no comic book counterpart for this guy. And so he's basically, so he is portrayed by Thomas Kretschmann in Blade 2. And there is a clear divide between Blade and his adversaries in the films, and he's constantly at odds with the purebloods. And that was pretty consistent when it came to Damaskinos in the second film. So he is essentially an ancient vampire who strives for perfection, having birthed thousands of children, including Jared Nomak, the first of the super breed of vampires that I mentioned earlier with the slit down his chin.
Yeah.
And it looked kind of like what the head of the thing from Stranger Things is, because it would come out of their throat and it's like all the wiggly woos. So gross. And so, yeah, I'm very curious what happened between film 1 and 2 if it wasn't the Sony thing, because Morbius could have fit into this situation pretty well if they had, written it well. But Damaskinos is he's very similar to Bram Stoker's Dracula in that he's the withered away version where he needs the blood, but he's so freaking old that he's just falling apart. And so he needs the blood to thrive. And so they're working on this whole new generation of vampires that are like super vampires because they want daywalkers, but also ones that are superior in every way, right? Henceforth, the chin split with the weird tongue thing.
I don't like it.
And so, much like Blackheart and his papa in Ghost Rider, Jared Nomak despised his creator, who was Damaskinos, and he attempted to rid the world of both him and the regular vampires. And so that was an interesting twist. It wasn't even a twist necessarily. It's just that there's a vampire that wants to kill everybody else, but he wants to stay alive at the same time because he hates the vampires, but he wants to stay. It's so weird. But they tried to pull that trope of like, again, like I said in the Ghost Rider one, like, like Mephisto created Blackheart with the intention of it being like, yeah, we can rule the world together. And then it's like, just kidding, he hates you. It's the same situation with Damaskinos and Nomak, is that he created Nomak, but Nomak was like, I hate vampires. I want to kill all of you. And then he kind of joins Blade in that revolution. But Blade kills him too because he's a vampire. So it's all this strife between them and just trying to maintain this so-called pure or enhanced bloodline. And it never quite works out. But there's one more adversary that Blade encounters in the films that we'll talk about today. And that, of course, is the big baddie himself, Dracula. And so it's not at all unheard that Dracula would be Blade's primary adversary given circumstances, and that he was also introduced in the Tomb of Dracula title. We're not going to talk about him much at all. We could technically talk about him in his own episode. He has on-screen time, and it's pretty abundant, but I would like to see him in a modern sense before we go there.
He deserves one.
I agree. But it is worth saying that Marvel's Dracula bears similarities to every historical and pop culture counterpart ever documented, which makes him the perfect storm to pit against a defender like Blade. So, again, in Tomb of Dracula, he is very much what you would expect him of, and the classic look, right? He's got the cape with the
cape
large
and the
collar and the widow's peak hair. And he's pale, and he has the little medallion on his perfectly ivory t-shirt. And he looks like that, but they have modernized him throughout time. And so we do see a bit of that in the film version with his portrayal by Dominic Purcell, by the way.
That's crazy.
I forgot I forgot that was him.
I
was
love
like,
him
oh my gosh.
in Prison Break.
Yeah, he's great in Prison Break. And so they pulled that guy for Dracula in Blade 3.
Okay.
And he is also known as Drake.
That's hilarious.
It's like, wait, what? Yeah.
Dracula? I
They
mean,
call
I see where you get it from, but like
Yeah. Well, it's
just call people by their names, man.
Well,
like
it's
you
like
don't gotta give like what is Ike Harris type of thing. Like what are we doing?
that I will accept Icarus, but also Icarus is 100% cooler.
That's what I'm saying.
But it's like Mephisto. It's like they were like
Mephistopheles.
and then they were also calling him other names. They were like, oh, he has an alias in this name. It's not Mephisto. It's another name, and it's like a human name. It's like, why are you gonna give Dracula Drake? You're gonna call him Drake?
That's just no.
So that killed me right up the get-go. I was like, oh my God, 2004. And they modernized him so much that he was like shirtless and wearing chains. And
Gross.
Like, oh my gosh.
That's hilarious. They're sexualizing Dracula?
I know, exactly. Pretty much. It's pretty
How
much what it
dare
is. And again,
they.
this is post-Interview with a Vampire and Queen of the Damned, for that matter, which, of course, top-tier vampire movie, if you ask me. And so there is always going to be the sexualization of vampires, but they went that extra mile with Dominic Purcell, let me tell you.
That is crazy.
And so in Blade 3, the tomb of Dracula was found in the middle of Iraq by Danica Talos, portrayed by Parker Posey, who also looks like a vampire by nature. She was definitely the early 2000s I don't want to say goth girl, but kind of a goth girl.
Okay.
Where she just looked like a walking vampire. She's so her features are so unique, and those lenses on her, oh my God. Yeah, she was great as a vampire. And so Danica and her minions found Dracula's tomb, and then he was immediately revived. It's kind of weird how it happened because it was so immediate. They didn't have to do anything. There was no ritual. There was nothing. They literally found him, and then he came out and he ate them all. And then he was like, you are part of my legion. And so Trinity was particularly huge, at least from my perspective, because the cast grew even larger than the film before it. So again, they had Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds and Natasha Lyonne and Patton Oswalt, Dominic Purcell, Parker Posey.
It's a lot of
names.
A lot of good names in there.
Yeah, and even in Blade 2, they had what's his name? The Hellboy guy.
Oh my God.
He was in there too.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, all these people are in these films. Anyway, and so take all those, I guess they were kind of A-listers at the time. I don't know if they are now.
I mean, yeah,
they're definitely known, yeah. And then you put on top of that Dracula and his involvement. And so it makes all the stakes even greater because, again, Whistler has died as well. And so there's this really kind of surprisingly complex movie in the final of it all. And so Dracula's power depiction in the film is also pretty damn cool because he's just got everything you can imagine. He can shapeshift. He can shadow shift. He's just an incredible warrior, which is, very Vlad Tepes of it all. He was a known warrior back in his day. And so they take all of these historical and canonical and notable attributes of the character in pop culture and history and then mashed him up into Dominic Purcell.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And then they also gave him this incredible, elaborate warrior gear, both as a human and as a vampire. And then he too had the split chin thing going on. So when he was at his peak Dracula status, he was freaking scary. Oh my gosh. I want to pull up a photo. He was just really scary. Jeff, I don't know that you would like it. But
I don't like scary things.
Yeah, his full demonic state was kind of crazy. And this looks cheesy. It's a bad picture. But that was his full demonic state. And then Dominic as Dracula. Yeah.
That would give me nightmares. Yeah, and for sure.
When he opened his mouth, this is what happened.
Ew!
Split chinner.
Don't want it.
So insane. And so, yeah, I really liked the depiction of Dracula in the film. It was a little cheesy. Again, he was going by Drake.
I just think that's so, just call people by their names, bro.
Blade, it's Drake. It's Drake. I was come on. What?
Just call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, despite his seemingly indestructible state, Drake is finally taken down by this experimental bioweapon known as Daystar, created by the Night Stalkers. And it was missing the key ingredient. So, it was just Dracula's blood. So, it just needed his blood to activate. It then set a domino effect. It killed the other vampires. And so,
wow.
Yeah, the whole thing was like, and Natasha Lyonne's character says this, she's like, it'll work, but I just don't know if you're gonna die too. And so you're kind of left with this open ending of, oh, does Blade die too because it killed Dracula and all the other vampires? But we do see at the end he is very much alive and he got away. But yeah, it's very interesting. I would like to see a better, bigger, badder, scarier Dracula go against Blade. That's not as broed out.
Sure.
But he was good. He was fine. You know, it's 2004. Again, it's like you can't really hate on 2004. It's 20 years ago. Like,
that's insane.
Yeah, that's so crazy to think about. So I would hope they would take a more traditional move with him later on, but we'll see. So in other versions and in other media, I did not really want to, again, I didn't want to talk about much of the other stuff, but I wanted to bring up this one thing, and it's called Blade the series. Were you aware of this?
No, I don't believe so. No.
Same, right? I think I vaguely remember it, but I could not watch it because I didn't have the channel. And so,
fair.
While not necessarily a variant, this is another take on the character that emerged shortly after Trinity and debuted as Spike TV's first.
Wow, Spike TV.
Where did they go, right?
That was, I used to watch that.
Yeah. So Spike TV's first original series in 2006, created once again by David S. Goyer, who contributed to the other films. So this guy is basically like the, I don't know, Sam Raimi of Spider-Man, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He was quite literally, he was all Blade. So he wrote the first two films, then wrote and directed the third film, and then created this original series. So he's like all over it.
Wow.
So it's very interesting. So yeah, this film, this show, I never watched it, but it seemed interesting. I looked up the trailer. I was like, okay, well, you know, it's definitely 2006. And so in this series, Sticky Fingers portrayed the Daywalker. Do you know Sticky Fingers?
That sounds like a rap name. I can't lie to you, dude. I can't lie to you.
He's definitely a rapper. I am not familiar with Sticky Fingers at all.
No.
But Sticky Fingers with a Z portrayed the Daywalker, though actor Michael Jai White. Also a martial artist who originally appeared in the original Spawn film. He apparently also auditioned for the role but did not get it. So that's trippy. You've not seen Spawn, I imagine.
Probably not.
It's an Image Comics thing.
Yeah. Oh,
I want to say it's 1997. I watched that film, and very interesting. And that's supposed to be remade with Jamie Foxx, I think.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so that original actor had auditioned for the role of Blade. However, Sticky Fingers beat him. And so the series was unfortunately ultimately canned after 1 season and 12 episodes, apparently due to budgetary reasons. So I've not seen it again. I would like to watch it to see why it costs so much, but I'm sure it has a lot to do with blood effects and blowing, vampires exploding and open chins and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, but you know, it exists. I don't know if it's easy to watch, but you know what I'm going to be doing soon. So that brings us to almost was. Oh my goodness. So hardly a surprise, but Hollywood icons Denzel Washington and Lawrence Fishburne.
Imagine. Oh, pretty much the three biggest people in the 90s.
Exactly. Basically, that's basically why they were all having hits during that era. And so the thing is, David S. Goyer, once again, he's so in the thick of it, he always thought Wesley was the perfect choice. So he wanted Wesley, he went with Wesley, and he ended up with Wesley. So that was it.
Wow.
But can you imagine a Lawrence Fishburne or Denzel Washington Blade? Oh
I see maybe a Fishburne type.
Yeah,
just because of his grandiose
Yeah.
like voice, his voice.
Yeah.
Denzel would be,
agree.
I'd be like, whoa.
Yeah,
I don't know.
but
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of his voice in my head.
He'd be like, oh, you okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vampires.
You vampire looking.
Yeah, exactly. Versus.
Yeah. But then Lawrence Fishburne would have been like too grandiose, like too vibrato. Like,
yeah. And
he'd
he's
be
also,
like,
he also seems so much taller.
and he's just like, he has this, like,
Huge.
and he just feels like more like his body is like more like
Stocky?
yeah, stocky's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So
Especially to plug him in where Wesley Snipes is moving like a freaking, he's just fast, right? He's
some of the fight scenes in the first Blade movie, I was like, oh.
Okay, and I'm gonna.
I was like,
people
they're
are gonna hate
going.
me for this because I'm segueing into Gambit Land, but that is almost the speed at which I expect to see Gambit move, and so to me, Channing's version just seems clunkier than that.
It's because he's buff as hell.
Because he's buff as hell. Exactly. Yeah. He's not supposed to be buff as hell. He's supposed to be fit and cut
and lean,
but not buff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Sure.
And so to see Blade moving at that rate, to see him not moving at that rate would be really weird and jarring, and that's why Lawrence Fishburne wouldn't work. And I also think, Wesley Snipes is he was such a specific look and vibe and feel.
It worked.
Yeah,
where I was like, yeah, that's Blade.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you type and you Google Blade comic, every version
looks like Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, almost identically. And so love him or hate him, that's Blade, man. I don't know.
Only ever gonna be one Blade.
I'm never gonna get tired of saying that. So the future of the character in the MCU. What do you think, Jeff? What do you think?
I mean, it's what it's currently unknown.
And they're still saying 2025, November 7, 2025, man.
That is.
It already has a rating.
That's a year from now.
They should have been filming already.
Yes.
Because Thunderbolts is done, and Thunderbolts comes out in May.
And if you're not filming yet, you have to film soon because production is at least 3 months. Post-production is at least 3 months.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's a mix of the Marvel Studios wants the story to be a certain way, and I don't know if it's a mixture of Mahershala wants the story a certain way.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's like clashing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are quick to blame like the studio, which is obviously it's very easy to blame the studio, but also it's kind of like, what if it's Mahershala?
I know. I hate thinking it, but I mean, common denominator always wins, right?
Like, I don't doubt that he cares about the character.
Sure.
Most actors should at least be respectful in that.
Yep.
But I also feel like, are you caring too much about the character to the point where you can't compromise?
Like, what's that writing room look like?
Exactly. You know what I mean? Already 2 directors have dropped out, which is,
it worries me.
Yeah. It's like, what if like why is like the director's dropping out, but Mahershala is still on?
Right.
You know, like Mahershala could have easily been like, no, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
But
I know. And Mia Goth as Lilith.
Oh, sorry, she signed on for the movie.
Yes.
I forgot about that.
My Pearl Queen.
So it's
She's
like
crazy.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I
know.
I like giving Feige the benefit of the doubt just because I mean, from the outside looking in, it looks like he really does care about, these characters, like making it on screen.
Yeah.
But I also feel like he's also he can compromise.
Yeah.
But
and it's script issues, right? They're saying it's script issues.
It has to be a script issue. Like maybe it is a thing of like on the Marvel side where it's like they want it to be set up a certain avenue, and maybe it's like a Scott Derrickson Doctor Strange 2 type route.
Yeah.
But still, at the end of the day, Scott Derrickson never was like, oh no, like he stepped away from it, but it was still very much like him, like he, and he's even gone on the record saying like, look, I have no problem with them like when I've worked with him, it's
Interesting.
very great.
Yeah.
You know, so
Because I see like one of the quotes from Wesley Snipes as recent as past July was that he's like, production delays are never the actor's fault. So it's like, interesting.
never the actors. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Oh yeah. It could also be like it's also I don't know. It's a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's never the singular an actor's fault, but it's also like maybe it's a director like wanting to shoot this, and then it's like, well, there's no money for it, and it's like, well, get money for it, and now you have this, and then it's like, so it's like it's a factor of a bunch of different things for sure.
Yeah.
Never just the actor and never just the director, but maybe it's also studio execs. Studio execs are also like not that great sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Ooh, boy. I mean, I hope we get to see it. I hope it's still Mahershala.
I'll take if I were to bet on it, we're not gonna see Blade until after 2026.
Oof.
Yeah. That's
So after
my
X-Men
bet.
is basically
That's
what
my
we're
bet.
looking at.
That's my
Ooh.
bet.
Oh,
because you
man.
would have to expedite it
Yeah.
now.
Now, yeah. Like it would have to go into production next year.
By the start of the
make
start of the new
26.
year.
Yeah.
But then it's also like, what if you do a screen test? Let's say you do a screen test in let's say like May. It scores horribly. Much like second Joker. Anyways.
They didn't even test it.
Exactly. So what if you do and you have to do reshoots?
Yeah.
That's also part of the contract. You got to do
Captain
reshoots.
America.
But then now look at Captain America now. People are like, oh my God, this looks really good. But then
Yeah.
again, it's just a trailer. But still, like, they did reshoots and they did screen tests.
Yeah.
But that's why you do them.
Man.
So, and if you're hoping for a November release, am I saying it's possible? Yeah, of course it is.
But it would be chaotic.
But you're going to be working people to the bone. But it's also people working. But it's like, it's not just Blade that's being worked on.
Yeah.
There's still your other
Exactly. They
projects.
still have other stuff to do.
Yeah.
So it's like
It's not the only like movie that's being released in
they
2025.
might quite literally have to nerf something in order to move the needle for Blade,
Exactly.
which is
Unless
like-
you add more budget
Right.
and you pay people that,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, like if you want to like I come from the world of post-production too, like where it's like, we need to get this out. And it's like, yeah, like we'll do that. Are you going to pay us? Are you going to pay overtime? Are you going to, and it's just like,
Ugh. So
then
it's
no.
a mess. It's just a mess. So if they don't cancel the film, they don't delay it.
if they don't
Or
agree
if they
on
don't
a script
yeah.
in the next 6 months,
Yeah, it's
or
essentially
even 3
gone.
months,
Yeah,
it's like, it's,
gone.
yeah, there's
It's
no,
gone for at least 3 years, I would say.
yeah.
And
Or
so-
you just, you just like, hey, we'll get this approved next year, but it's not releasing 2025.
No, there's no way.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no way.
Just, yeah. So like my money is on after 2026. I don't know if that means, I don't know if it's during or 2026 or after, but I'll go latter half 2026 on.
Well, I hope you're right because, yeah, I would love to see it. I think also part of it might be just that maybe there's so much to it that they've pitched. What if we do a series instead? And there was like a definitive no.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, we're gonna go to film, and then it just turns into a whole debacle, which
Yeah.
is just unfortunate. But again, hopefully they'll nail something down because we need a revival. I mean, they should know that they have to strike, especially post Deadpool and Wolverine. you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And then what if MCU's Blade, depending how that is, that's why so many other pieces are delayed, like Moon Knight or Werewolf.
Exactly right, and that could be why.
Like what if what if those projects aren't being tended to or even like brought up in conversation because of they want to do this with Blade first to
Yeah.
set this up.
Exactly right. I want my occult people.
Give us
I want all my spooky folks.
maybe they want, and maybe Feige really wants to do like a Midnight Suns
I
thing.
know, he better. I'm
May-
sure he's thinking about it.
And it's like, but it's like that can't happen unless we agree on this. And then what if Mahershala is like, well, I don't want to do that.
No, it's probably exactly
And it's
what's
like,
happening.
okay, well, crap. Like
Yeah.
that was kind of like what we wanted to at least introduce.
Ugh.
And then he's like, no, I don't want to be a part of the Midnight Sun.
That
I
just
want to be
makes me mad.
I only want to be my one blade.
That makes me so mad.
That's just me. That's just
nice.
me just like
No,
spitballing.
but sure. I mean, it's could be an option and it could be a possibility. You know what I mean? So it's like unfortunate because there could be a truth to that, which is just like, okay, get the damn movie.
I wish there was someone listening and they heard this and they'd be like, damn, that guy's pretty spot on. I wish I could. I wish.
You never know, Jeff. You never know.
I know. Maybe like 10 years from now, remember that guy on that one pod.
There's that one guy on that one podcast that made this happen.
He was right.
So unfortunately, yeah, it'll be a couple of years until we see Blade, but we'll see. We'll see if miracles happen or if we're just a full stop and there is no Blade for this generation. Who knows? But you can go back and read some of the good stuff as far as the comics are concerned. And so this list of suggested reading comes courtesy of listener Billy. Thanks, Billy. I know we probably botched your boy, but hopefully we didn't make you too mad. But thank you for your references and your suggestions, because these were actually the ones that I would have probably pulled as well. And so first up, of course, is Tomb of Dracula number 10, which is Blade's first appearance. You should definitely read that. He does appear subsequent issues. I think he even dies in issue number 52. He appears in the Dracula title off and on, and so it's pretty good. Next up, Blade, Blood, and Chaos, which includes Blade numbers 1 through 3 from 1998, as well as 1 through 6 from 1999, where Blade finds himself in the middle of an undead gang war when a vampiric mafia Don's daughter seeks vengeance for the sins of her father, and Blade is the weapon of choice. It also includes the story of Morbius in Nolans. Pretty fantastic. And then there's also X-Men Curse of the Mutants, which includes X-Men 1 through 6 from 2010. This is the storyline that we've talked about a couple of times now, where Jubilee becomes infected with the vampire curse. And then last but not least, Blade Max 1 through 6 from 2002. This is where Blade hunts a new threat, the Trick, that an extremely vicious mutant vampire species.
Nice.
Thanks, Billy, for those. Yeah, amazing stuff. Definitely want to read more Blade now that I have more adult time to do so.
There's only ever gonna be one Blade.
I know, exactly. And again, there's always room for the occult and the vampires and the werewolves. And
I
all
thought
that
you
good
said
stuff.
Yakult, dude.
The cult?
Yakult.
Oh,
the
cult.
drink. No, I thought you said Yakult. The
Oh,
drink.
not Yakult. Yeah, I've never had that. Have you?
Oh, the probiotic drink?
Yeah, I've
of
not had
course.
that.
It's
I've not had
Asian.
I'm a bad Asian. I should try that. But yeah, the occult, not the beverage. Werewolves, vampires, good stuff. And all that said, oh my gosh, guys, that is the end of the show. Thanks for listening. So next episode, as we talked about up top, the first season of Agatha All Along is coming to an end by our next issue.
Nice. Yeah, we
We're
make
a comic
comics too,
book.
guys.
It's coming to an end. And so, yeah, by our next episode, we will be discussing the series so far. We'll see if there's a season 2 in our spoiler-filled review of the first season. So join us then, which will then, of course, be bookended with an episode about Agatha herself as a character.
Yes.
So it's a lot of Agatha coming up your way just in time for spooky season and as we venture into fall. And finally, a thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and a special We Are Groot salute to Edgar, Ed, Melanie, Katie, Ashley, Laura, Ariel, Joe, Liz, Robin, Sherry, Andrew, Nats, Andrea, Jenny, Chris, and Tyler. Follow us on social at STRKC and TRST. And if you like what you hear, review, rate, and subscribe.
Woo!
Woo!
Once again, thanks for listening. We will catch y'all in the next one.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Motherfucker, are you out of your damn mind?